So without further ado, I'd like to call upon our first speaker, first politician, ex-president, ex-secretary, ex-MC, HMC, and senior sophomore English student, Mr. Owen Hall.
Gay debate always gets a good crowd. Mr. President, defenders of the faith, godless sodomites. It is normally with great pleasure that I stand at this august chamber of the University Philosophical Society, but it is not tonight. It is not tonight because of the motion before the House. The proposal that depraved and licentious homosexuality is comparable and compatible with the divine distillations we receive through religion is preposterous. You tux-wearing, man-hugging, liberal debater types have gone too far. Now, don't get me wrong, I myself have dabbled with homosex. I'm nothing against people who choose to be gay. So my best friends are going to hell. Have we really gone so mad to think that religion and homosexuality can go together? Anyone with the remotest sense of history, of theology, of contemporary politics knows how preposterous this marriage, and I know you have difficulty with that, but how this marriage of religion and gayishness is. And before we get into the ludicrous of that, let's just have a little look at our speakers tonight. Father Brian McKevitt, big fan. It's like I always say, if there's one thing this country needs, it's more old celibate virgins telling people how to conduct their sexual lives. No, you see, Father McKevitt is an it-getter. He gets it, okay? Sure, God created 100 billion stars in each of the 100 billion galaxies in the vast and ancient cosmos. But he cares about what one species of ape does on this planet in the bedroom. And he knows this, and he spreads that message, so thank you. Or, if you're Seamus Byrne, it's done in the bathroom promo. So, be wary, I would say. So thank you, Father McKevitt. Where the world would be without your kind compassion, who knows? Lily, our next speaker, is actually a student of religion and philosophy. You know who else was big into philosophy and religion? Thomas Aquinas. But Lily only learned of his existence a year into studying theology. So, again, word of caution. Nell, no thanks to you. I'm legitimately afraid of you. If I said anything offensive, you would destroy me. So I'll just apologize for being male and move swiftly along. Emmet, I don't know you. I can only assume you're an alcoholic because you're on the other side of the table. So we'll move on with that one again. Darren McCallig, the most reverend Darren. We all know what you're going to say tonight. God doesn't hate you. We can all get along. Darren, I'm disappointed in you. You're living in a fantasy land. You don't have to be a biblical literalist to understand the unambiguous hatred our Lord has for gay people. You should read your Bible. Instead, like the Allied response to the growth of Nazi Germany, you've been too busy appeasing the gays. You're a sexual Neville Chamberlain. Okay, so we'll move on. Number one, God hates fags, and number two, fags hate God. Does God hate fags? Yes, he does. Okay? You're all smart people. You know perfectly well the distaste our celestial dictator has for gay people. Leviticus 18:22. Thou shalt not lie with mankind as with womankind. It is an abomination. Checkmate liberals. Okay? Father McKevitt, can we get a high five? No. Okay, never mind. You're also free to view this in Corinthians, Timothy, Deuteronomy, Ezekiel, and Romans. Yes, that's in the New Testament. For those still unconvinced, let me tell you the story of Sodom and Gomorrah. Sodom and Gomorrah was the biblical San Francisco, full of vile depravity and impotent sin and unashamed gayness. But you know what Yahweh's judgment on Sodom and Gomorrah was? He didn't rent a holiday home there. He didn't sign a petition against it. He destroyed it. He burned it to the ground with fire and brimstone and consumed it. So, that was his judgment, that was his wrath. God hates fags. And why shouldn't he? He's God, he can do what he wants. Secondly, you guys are always trying to undermine straight marriage, okay? How? I don't know, but I believe it. What about the people that only got married so they could taunt gay people? If gay people get married, their marriages are ruined, okay? So, let's have some compassion. And as for Jesus, well, I think we can assume that he preferred to shame gay people than give orphan families. Like, that's just a misnomer, or like an obvious thing. So, like, we can conclusively see that homosexuality is incompatible with religion. But is religion incompatible with homosexuality? And that brings us to our point 2, fags hate God. And I'm willing to take a POI on any of the substantive material. No, okay. So, fags, and I mean that in the nicest way. By any metric, you should hate religion, okay? Hate it in every gay bone in your feminine bodies. Because instead of like watching Sex and the City all the time or undermining straight marriage, you should check out history. Yeah, there's a lot in there. Just think of the untold miseries in which the church has landed upon like your people. Sure, things were fine in ancient Greece where everyone was gay, but there was no organised priesthood or central biblical text to bind society. But then Jesus came along and things weren't too great. It was pretty much like Brokeback Mountain on repeat for 2 millennia. Okay, it's horrific. Secondly, the church, sure.
Do you not think that, like, because it used to be acceptable and it went through a period of it being unacceptable within certain religions, that perhaps we could come around again and make progress and become, like,
okay. Well, perhaps if we change what religion is, then religion will be compatible. But you're kind of changing it, so until that time, let's deal with the reality of the face. Okay, so the church has been against condoms for nearly all of their existence. Maybe there's some hard feelings there. I don't know, I'd be pissed. Finally, also the negative influence religion plays around the world in terms of gay rights activism, whether it be Mormons in California, Christian Right in France, the UP in Northern Ireland, the Catholic Church in Ireland, like all of which fundraise, campaign and fight and kill against your freedom, albeit sinful freedom. Okay, so like, maybe you're like, hold on, you're just talking about Abrahamic religions. What about like Buddhism, a gay-friendly religion? Common misconception. Buddhism is not a religion, okay? It's a cult. It's a cult where people braid their hair funny and walk around in conga lines. So don't try that. Don't try it. But no, more so, and this is my point to what Lily was saying, religion not as what religion could be or hypothetically should be or can evolve to be, but what it inherently is as an idea, as an institution and a political reality. That's incompatible with homosexuality. Because religion is closed-minded, it's intolerant, it's capricious, it's authoritarian, and it's unamenable to reason. And those traits completely oppose the modern phenomenon of the homosexuality, like march for freedom in terms of rights, dignity, and respect. So what you have to do to make them compatible is compromise those rights. You have to do what Darren does, and like, well done, and pick and choose what aspects of religion you do, thus showing you have an external morality and saying like religion therefore is redundant. So religion as it is, and it always has been, as inherently is, systematically, is incompatible. So for those reasons, we propose.
Right, so unlike Owen, I'm not going to be quite so spiteful about the idea of religion, and instead look at it in a more broad-minded way, and look at religion as more of kind of a concept. And I will refer to certain religions throughout my speech to sort of back up my points, but I'd like everyone to just kind of open their minds a little bit and think of religion as a concept, something that is personal, not one institution, and not one of many institutions. Okay, first of all, I kind of like to think about, perhaps we have the idea of why religion, or why homosexuality is incompatible with religion. And I think, okay, if we go back to the very inherent beliefs of a lot of religious people, is the idea of sort of the family. And the idea sort of of the family is a very important one, plays a central role in many of the main religions, especially Christianity, Judaism, very important. And we can understand why back in the day when we were less educated and we had less communication with the outside world, why it would have seen that homosexuality threatens the idea of the family. The idea that God's lineage needs to be passed on down person to person seems very important, but we say that is no longer relevant in this society because we've seen that we don't have conventional societies. We have things such as IVF and adoption, which allows straight people alike and gay people to become families and to make families. So that point I see is void. Second, sort of there's always going to be a natural hostility towards things that we don't quite understand and things that we find different in society. And I think that perhaps not now, but back when in ancient times, or just even 60, 70 years ago, no thanks miss, we had this hostility towards homosexuality because it was different. It was something we didn't really understand. And people can manipulate religion so that it becomes that like religion is against homosexuality, where really it's people who are against homosexuality. Like Owen came up here and talked about Sodom and Gomorrah. What Owen left out about Sodom and Gomorrah is like it doesn't actually directly say that why God destroyed Sodom because of homosexuality, but the fact, no thank you, but the fact that the story of Sodom and Gomorrah was the fact that it was rape, and we forget that. And why do we forget that? Because we want to manipulate the story so that it backs us up because we're so hostile and closed-minded to homosexual people. And I see a lot of change in that. Okay, secondly, I want to move on to my other point, which is how culture shapes religion, and how it's not just religion that tells us what to do, but that the people and society dictate what religion tells us. So this idea of like how culture has changed, and culture has shaped religion, because we see that like even like Catholic values that we have today in Ireland, they're not the same as they were 20 years ago, they're not the same they were 50 years ago, they're not the same they were 2,000 years ago, because culture and society have reacted to religion and have reacted to what religion has told them. And we now know that there's more dialogue between religion and the people than there was more than ever. You can even see this, like a perfect example is like in Islam, which we would probably consider, like no offense to anyone, a rather conservative religion, right? But we can see that there are different degrees to kind of their conservatism when it comes to sort of politics and when it comes to society. And we look at, no thank you, and we look at like examples where in certain Islamic countries, homosexuality is punishable by death. In certain Islamic countries, homosexuality is not a crime and it's not punishable by anything. And why is this? It's obviously not because of just Sharia law and what religion or Allah is telling us to do. It's because that religion is reacting to its people and it's reacting to social change. Because let's face it, if whatever religion we like call ourselves, if we were to live by every single law and rule, we wouldn't have many followers and religion would probably cease to exist. But we have to understand that people want religion in their lives, but people also want to have their own opinions, and people want to be as liberal or conservative as they want to be with those. And so religion sort of reacts to this. And also, yeah, go on.
It's not exact that in today's world, especially in America and other world, people are getting more and more extreme. So they're actually arguing away from religion and homosexuality ever becoming more.
I do agree. I do think that is one aspect, and I'm not going to deny that there are certain like established religions or organised religions that are very backwards-minded thinking, and you're always going to have that. But you're always going to have an extreme of anything. You're always going to have like militant people. Like you're always going to have like people who don't care about certain issues, and then people who care too much about certain issues. So I don't think that's to say that like religion as a whole, no thank you, is completely against the idea of homosexuality. Like there's so many sort of things that so many aspects of religion that they dictate to us that we used to respect in the past that we no longer respect, and we see that as fine and we don't make a big deal out of it. So I don't see why homosexuality should be much different. It's like you can choose to be offended by it, but do something about it, and that is what people are doing. No thank you. Like we look at things like say like, okay, the example of say birth control, like we used to accept like maybe like say 100 years ago that was legitimate, that we say, okay, that's a mortal sin, fine. But no, we don't anymore because society responds to it and in turn religion responds to it. And so if there's so many, if we don't live by the book, like about every single line of a Bible or a Torah or whatever you want, then you have to understand that like just because we don't respect many aspects, why should homosexuality be any different? Okay, I'll move on to my third point, which is sort of like the idea of the personal interpretation of religion and what religion as a whole, as a concept, can mean to the individual. Because I think it's a horrendous statement to accept that like anyone can be religious and anyone can go to church as often as they want, because you know we mostly are probably quite liberally minded and we accept that people will take what they want from religion at times. But how dare anyone say that like because someone's gay and because like the church is hostile, the church that we've grown up with in this country is hostile towards that gay person, that automatically makes them incompatible with that church. I think that's a horrendous thing to say. No, thank you. Seriously, you have to look at so many people who are so hypocritical towards their faith. They're towards their faith anyway, and some people that take their own interpretation from religion, as it should be, as there are millions of denominations of religion, millions of colours of it, and you have to look at those religions, and they take what they want from it, and they give back to their people, and they offer followers or believers whatever they want from that religion, and you can't deny that, and you can't just look at the most conservative religions and say, okay, it's incompatible with homosexuality, because you have to understand that different religions have different interpretations, and different people, no thanks, have different interpretations of that religion, and they're allowed to take on religion. I mean, religion, I think, to many people is an inherently personal thing. It's a personal connection. Like, what people get out of religion isn't just reading the Bible and listening to a priest bang on for an hour every Sunday. It's like, what people find, it's like this kind of idea of hope and this idea of faith that people like. And like that religion is merely the medium that they get that faith and that they get that sort of connection to whatever they see it as a higher being or spiritual being or just even a connection to another world and hope and faith. And I don't think that should be any different for anyone, whether they be like gay or straight, man or woman, whatever you have it. I don't think that you can take any sort of personal interpretation that anyone gets out of religion. And you condemn people who are religious, and we do it every day because religion, bad, homosexuality, good, okay. But that's not to say that the two can't be compatible just because there have been intolerances within the past. I think that you have to broaden your mind and you have to actually say that, oh hey, there are actually gay people who are religious. And I think even just saying that kind of disproves the whole motion. I beg you to oppose. Thank you.
Nell McCafferty.
The motion, as you know, states that homosexuality is incompatible with religion. It's the wrong motion. Is religion compatible with God? Are men compatible with heterosexuality? I say no to all three. I'm amused at how I speak now from a DNA of Catholic culture. I have a lasting experience of Judaism. I've been up to that mosque and wherever it is in Dublin. And I know a few Protestants, my granny was one. But I like the way the Catholic Church adopted very quickly when they realised just how many gay people were around, including men. They said it is all right to be homosexual, but you mustn't, it is all wrong to do something about it. And not the way of putting it, I prefer Frank Sinatra, Canada's a nice doobie, 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 doobie. With that rhythmic intonation, but let us not get too graphic. Is religion compatible with God? For a long, long time now. Holy men abolished God and inserted themselves as the middlemen. Who needs God when we've got men in a sexual fever to decide what must be? Why are they always talking about sex? And I don't like people who are unclear. I'm unclear. Why are we so obsessed about sexual practice? But that was phrased rather better than me by Emmet Jordan-Kelly, who was quoting the judge who brought in the reports on the abuse of children by priests when he said they suppressed that scandal. The church did all the way to the Vatican. They suppressed that scandal because they sacrificed the children to the good name of the church. Kenny didn't say, nor did the judge, nor did the Pope contradict them. Nobody said the priesthood sacrificed the children. Oh, I'm on a roll here. To the good sacrificed the children to the good name of God. Even the Pope knew. Let us not damn God. Speaking of the Pope, it was with a bitter smile this morning that I read that the Vatican had conferred papal knighthood on Jimmy Savile, sacrificing God knows how many children to the good of the charities for which he raised so much money. So the church, as has been proven, sacrificed children and sacrificed church, I'm also talking about Muslims, etc. The church is not compatible. Religion is not compatible with God. Is religion compatible with sexuality? Here I have a difficulty. What is it with Jesus Christ hanging naked on a cross with affecting loincloth across his genitals? Where I come from, it's called S&M. That you've never looked at Christ naked on the cross and the loincloth and wondered, did he have, as so many men do when they're being hung, did he have an involuntary erection? Don't tell me you didn't think about Christ. 33 single away with his mother, what is he? Are men compatible with heterosexuality? I refer you, having mentioned 50 Shades of Jesus, to 50 Shades of Grey, Volume 1, pages 112 to 120. That's all you need to read. It is the kind of penetrative heterosexual intercourse known as vanilla sex. The actual penetration doesn't come until page 120. From 112 to 119, Christian Grey, for it is he, engages in foreplay. Such foreplay, I learned a few things myself. I think around this country, women's book clubs should read those 8 pages aloud and then mark their male partners on a Eurovision scorecard anonymously, of course, from nil to douze points. I say to them, don't even get to the start line. If they read the book, I also think that women, with men, should read this book aloud to the man, or better still, get him to read it and rate themselves on what goes on there. I'm no cynic, and as I say, I learned something from that book, particularly the way you can bend the sun like Beckham when it goes up her vagina. Okay, who knows anything? I say read that book. Look upon the men ye mighty and despair. This is not to say that men are beyond learning. It is here to say what a sad, I'm very lucky in many ways that I was born gay, that I didn't have to put up with what women never had to put up with between cases 112 and so if men are incompatible with heterosexuality, and religion is incompatible with God, is God compatible with sexuality? What is sexuality? I remember asking that in 1973, shortly after we launched Women's Liberation Movement. We were talking about women's livers, and someone put the term feminist. You might go there, think you didn't look it up. And then came the term sexuality. And I remember us all said, oh, fairly grown woman, fairly experienced one, been around the block a few times saying, Jesus, what is sexuality? What is it in those days? It is the capacity to respond erotically or emotionally to another. Doesn't say what gender. Just the capacity to respond. Why the church spends so much time twisting themselves out of shape to get us to bend ourselves into their shape on the issue of sexuality, as I keep saying, eludes me, perhaps our learned friends of mine left here will explain to me before this night is out why the church, and especially men, are so obsessed with sex. Thank God for cheating. None of you know the way they bent us out of shape. I think nowadays people take their pill with their cornflakes, it's all legal. But when I was coming of age in the 70s, and the church said, oh, contraception is legal and moral and makes you fat. They said, let's have the rhythm method, which involved so taught before, when you go to pre-marital courses, which involves the woman taking a thermometer, putting it in her mouth, then putting it up her vagina, checking the mucus level and the temperature, and turning around to her male partner saying, "Not tonight, Joseph." And I'm supposed to do that when they're honeymoon. Jesus, Mary and Joseph, what a honeymoon that must be. We got around that in the 70s, even though contraception was illegal, because doctors started prescribing it under the counter behind closed doors as a cycle regulator, meaning if you're an Olympic swimmer and you're due to, or Olympic fight Taylor in a month's time, they'll give you the pill as a cycle regulator. It's no coincidence that Ireland had the highest rate of irregular menstrual flow in all of Europe and those I have 1 minute to look at the future. I am not sure that I just believe in God. In my dark nights, they are many. I find myself saying, "Please, Jesus, let me sleep." Or the only mantra I know, "Hail Mary, full of grace." I go through all that. I haven't given up on God. And if you read your 50 Shades of Grey, fellas, I haven't given up on foreplay. I think that had I been reared in a different era, one more open, like the one you're all in now, I think I could have been both ways. Which would be better? I mean, I said for half the word I could have had both. Why wasn't I? Because I was young, I could see an woman, I knew about various things, and I'm going to do a bit wrong here, so I'll be back with you in a minute. Of course, I didn't know as they were then in my own domestic situation. I just did not wish to know. I think also I was born that way. But I've now come increasingly to the notion that in a world that is properly regulated, and we're getting that where, if you're raised and there's no taboo, no secrecy, no doobie-doobie-doo, you are what you are. Children will grow up, their parents, their ministers, their cultural compass. Nobody will say, "Oh Jesus, she's looking at a child, the daughter's looking at another girl, my son's looking at another boy." I think, as Mary McCallig could have got around 2 weeks ago, you don't determine what you are, you discover what you are. I think in a properly regulated world, particularly if you read 50 Shades of Grey, fellas, we'll grow up, we won't know what we're going to be. Nobody will frighten us. We will be open. How it's all going to turn out, I don't know. I'm delighted. I'm glad, finally. We've gone so far beyond the 70s when they were discussing extending the definition of rape to say the violation of anyone with a broom or a bottle or whatever. John Gardy, Mr. Justice Wood, the supporter of Charlie Coffee. I can't bother, I actually stop it. Sean Doherty ruled and the Dáil agreed that rape could only be defined as a penetration of a woman by a penis. Well, he said, for God's sake, when we're getting raped with bottles or getting raped with broomsticks, you've got to extend the definition. He said, no, you know why he doesn't extend the definition? Because to say a woman could be raped by a bottle was to cast aspersions on the sacred penis. Violation could only occur if a man betrayed his own penis or brought a bad reputation on it. It took years before the Dáil turned around and said, look, rape can happen with a bottle, with a broom, and with a penis. It'll take many more years of God, I think, before the word will say, love and sexual joy can happen at any age, anywhere, anytime. Let us explore, let us relax, let us enjoy in the name of God. Thank you for listening.
Convention speech, and we'll then move on to our third member of proposition,
There you are. All right. I'd like your understanding, first of all, because I have to follow that. I'd like to say thank you for inviting me, and I'm very excited to be here. I was interested when I was asked to speak, really, and I wondered how the debate would turn. I wondered, would we speak about issues of identity politics and postmodern kind of conceptions of the self, or would we go more essentialist and spiritual and philosophical, and I kind of deemed that would be the best way to go. So as a sexuality theorist, I did a master's last year in sexuality, so I'm a bit of an amateur, but I want to draw attention to the fact that we're actually having this conversation at all. We have created a discourse this evening here that essentially questions, can a human being have a spiritual component to their lives? And I would say resolutely yes. I think secondly, I may draw attention to the difference between spirituality and religion. My experience of religion being somewhat unfortunate in that it may have been relevant to overdressed and very sparkly virgins in Rome pontificating about my sexual practices, and my experience of spirituality most certainly comes from within. So I'd like to use my own personal experience and my own journeys and my own identities to highlight really my points and to hopefully relate to anyone that's here or anyone that can hear me in any medium, I suppose. Because I think it's relevant, it's human experience. And most importantly, I come before you as the rare and elusive self-identified spiritual gay man. I understood I was gay first, not as a celebratory and certainly not as a proud thing, but absolutely as something of fear and of shame, something that I associated with immorality. The word abomination was used. It was very frightening. Something that I definitely wouldn't want to repeat. I attended my own conversion therapies in the name of Christ the Lord, and I kissed all the girls on the street, stole my best friend's girlfriend, told everyone I fancied Buffy when I actually fancied Xander. It wasn't the best time. I prayed for a cure. I actually prayed for a cure, and I prayed really, really hard for a cure. I prayed for the phase to go away, and it didn't go away. I'm very, very glad it didn't. Because I can proudly say that I love myself. And that, for me, is where my spirituality kind of germinated. I want you to just for a second imagine the young people in your own lives. If you've got a younger brother or sister, or niece or nephew, imagine them praying to not be who they are, afraid of what the world will think of them, afraid of what they think of themselves. I'd like you to imagine a young boy who bombards his mind with images of sexualized women to force himself into an erection to heal himself. Basically, yeah.
Do you not partially blame the church for causing you to feel this way, that you needed to change, that who you are wasn't okay?
Do I partially blame the church? I don't wholly blame the church, but I certainly blame the church. Yeah. But the distinction between what my relationship to God is and whether or not God and homosexuality can be compatible, and whether or not I can relate to a pontificating virgin in Rome on a golden throne with more dresses than an average drag queen, for me isn't really relevant. So I was afraid of the boogeyman, and the difference was I was told that he'd actually come and get me. The boogeyman was real, you know. He lived in Rome and he had fire and brimstone at his expression. I'd like to just consider that for a moment in the context of the mental health situation across the world. But in Ireland there was a study done quite recently, a few years ago, based from the Children's Research Centre, which is part of Trinity College. They studied LGBT young people and their mental health, and they found that they are 4 times more likely to consider suicide and self-harm than their heterosexual brothers and sisters. 4 times more likely. And I use this expression with it's sincerely there, but for the grace of God. My rescue essentially was in love, and that's what I've come to know God to be. I have wonderful friends, and I met fantastic and very brave young people. My family is an absolute net of support, and from there I germinated the seed of a relationship with God. And that is my religion. My religion is absolutely love. And understanding love and learning to understand that it is absolutely unconditional comes from within, from a universal source from which I came, from which I will absolutely return. I know wholeheartedly that God is love, and therefore I'm absolutely grateful to it. Go on.
The question is, how do you know that this became about discomfort because of a God, and not simply because you became older, more mature, and more self-aware?
How do I know that it's a relationship with God? Because it's stronger than me. and it is bigger than me and it's bigger than us all. It's just my experience, I suppose, and I do genuinely feel that people are entitled to their own experience, I suppose. I think it's funny though that someone would dare to say that I'm not a spiritual being because I might lust for a man in his fleshy wonder, and that I live for the moments when sex and God crash together in a big human sticky mess, and you can't help but just invoke, oh God, oh God, oh God, and we've all absolutely been there, and it's just ironic to me that we've all prayed while coming. But consider it to be separate. To consider sex and spirit separately, it's a really short-sighted thing. We're a really complicated being, and sex is definitely a part of what we are. I won't actually tolerate really I've come full circle, and I don't really feel like tolerating the exclusivity and the bullying and the ignorance of clubs of moral monopolies that insist that I'm not a whole human. I think was the recent statement from the Vatican was that I may not be fully developed or I may not be whole. Most certainly LGBT people can be spiritual, most certainly they can relate to religion because they are human beings. And if I can be a little bit pretentious and quote an old school scholar, Terence with one R, if you wanted to Google him, he was a slave and released and wrote wonderful tragedies and comedies, and he says, Homo sum humane nihil ame alienem Pluto, and that means I am a human being, therefore nothing human can be alien to me. And what is human is gay. I won't tolerate the ignorance and I won't tolerate the bullying. I don't think it's necessary, and I think I can wholeheartedly relate to God, as I said, because I'm a person. It's not Christian to exclude people. Jesus wouldn't have it. You may say there's the kingdom of heaven, let the queers come. Maybe I'm a messenger. Maybe I'm two-spirit. To the versions I mentioned earlier on in Rome, and their fanfare and their golden palaces and their gilded pillars, I'd like to say that my soul is wiser and older and stronger than your palaces. It knows slightly more than your good books. As I said, I may just be two-spirit. I am human wonder made flesh, and I would encourage you all to understand the most luminous parts of yourselves. I'm as gay as humanly possible. And what I know is that God is love, and I'm wholeheartedly able to relate to that. Thank you.
I consider it a privilege to be here tonight, speaking to you in this college dedicated to the Blessed Trinity, Trinity College. I'm going to try and appeal to your reason rather than your funny bone in what I try to say. The issue, I think, is really not so much about homosexuality as about the nature of sexuality, the nature of human sexuality. Homosexuality is only a small area of that, and it has to be seen in the much wider, broader context. How are we to understand human sexuality? There are various dimensions to our sexuality. Various dimensions like love, attraction, physical pleasure, marriage, babies, union, mutuality, complementarity, whole range of areas connected with sexuality. And the fundamental question really is, do all these different aspects belong to one unity? Do they all constitute a unity? Or can we just pick and choose as we like among the various aspects of human sexuality? I'll take questions at the end, please. And basically, the Western culture is saying that we can pick and choose as we wish. And that is the culture to which you have been exposed over and over and over again. So much so that you would probably have great difficulty even grasping the other vision of sexuality. You have been told if you want to have sexual pleasure without commitment, that's fine. If you want to have sex without babies, that's fine. We're now at the point where we can have babies even without sex, and that's considered okay. Homosexual behavior, all right, that's fine if that's the way what a person chooses. I don't know if you saw very recently the Hollywood director Nick Cassavetes, who has just produced a film called Yellow, and in it he is basically promoting, and indeed in an interview following its presentation at the Toronto Film Festival, in it he is advocating brother-sister sex. His basic thing is, if there are no kids involved, then why not?
Sir?
Sorry, I'll take it later, thank you. If there are no kids involved, he says, you know, what's wrong? Why be bothered? If it's just a question of love whoever you want to love, then why not love your brother or your sister if that's how you are attracted? That's just kind of, if you like, later on. That is just kind of how the thing is developing. The opposite vision of that is the vision that human sexuality constitutes a unity. That all of these different aspects have an innate unity. But if we say that, we are kind of pointing then towards nature, the nature of sexuality. Whereas in the first vision, if sexuality is a matter simply of choice, and it has not got an innate unity, then that, I think, reflects to some extent the culture of modern hopelessness, the culture of despair that prevails, thank you later, the culture of despair that prevails in the Western world. And ultimately that is a culture that has rejected God. And because God has gone, then we have lost a sense of our own human dignity. We have lost a sense that we are destined for eternal life, that we are destined for full humanity here on earth. Later on, thank you. That it's ultimately this total attitude towards sexuality is an expression of hopelessness. It is an idea that you just grab whatever pleasure, happiness you can here and now, because there is nothing coming afterwards. There is no intrinsic nature of human sexuality. The alternative vision is that all of this constitutes a unity, and that the purpose of sexuality, and we've got to ask, has it got a purpose? And this vision says, no, sorry, I've explained, I take the questions at the end, thank you. This vision of human sexuality says that the purpose of sex, the God-given purpose of sex, if you like, even the reasonable purpose of sex, but we stick with God-given for the moment. The God-given purpose of sex is to express the love and to deepen the love between a husband and a wife in a union that is open to new life. And that is the one and only purpose of human sexuality. So it is not just against, we're not just simply saying that homosexual behavior is wrong, we're also saying that sex outside of marriage is wrong. Yeah, thank you. So, this is, as I explained to you at the beginning, or as I said at the beginning, this is probably a new idea for many of you. It is probably a difficult idea to grasp. But in reality, many of you will hope to end up with a husband or a wife, and that you will want a happy marriage, you will want happy families. And so this is what you are being asked to undermine or to support at this stage. This idea of the marriage, the family is the fundamental society in which children are born. It is there that they realize or they discover that they are not simply individuals, but that they are members of a community. As I say, this is rooted in the idea of God and God's vision for human sexuality and human life. Later on, thank you. Sorry, I'll take it later on, thank you. So, what we're talking about, sorry, I would prefer to start down. Thank you. We are talking about a particular vision of yourself as a human being. I did not come in here tonight to win a debate. A debate is kind of codology as far as I'm concerned. And if it was only what we're concerned about is trying to find truth. What we're concerned about above all is trying to live in harmony with the truth. And the accusation or the acclamation of shame is not really an argument. What we're trying to do is to use our minds. That's a form of abuse rather than trying to use our minds and find out, is there a truth here that we have to respect and that we have to live by? And I am offering you this different vision, which I think many of you in your own hearts will recognize that that is what you want for your own life, and that really is what you believe that human sexuality is about. The deepening, it's the body language of the love between a husband and a wife. It is the total giving of one person to the other. And that total giving is a life-giving, a giving of one's life to the other and the acceptance of life from the other person. And that is expressed bodily through sexuality. And that is rooted in the vision of God. So I propose to you that it is a vision of God that helps us to understand truly what sexuality is. Thank you very much. Sure.
Does the Catholic Church not also teach primacy of conscience?
Primacy of conscience of conscience in general is a judgment. It's not a feeling, it's not an emotion. It is a judgment about the truth. It's a way of coming to know the truth. And in coming to know the truth, we listen to various we read, we study, we think, and we ultimately come to, we listen to the teaching of the church, we listen to the scripture, whatever it may be, and we ultimately make a judgment about what is true or false, whatever. But conscience is not inevitably correct. We can have an error in our conscience. We may make the wrong judgment. So yes, the church recognizes primacy of conscience, but it also recognizes that our conscience may be wrong.
I was just going to ask, Father, when it comes to gays and heaven, do you think gays shall not pass?
Okay, we take another question, please. Is there another question?
It's not a question but more a point of information, I suppose. I'd like to say that, as I said, I won't actually tolerate the societal bullying, and not to be disrespectful, but I would encourage you all to understand that your sexuality is in fact your own, regardless of heterosexual or homosexual or anything in between, and that nobody can understand it more than you. And I would hope and pray that you can emancipate yourself from that.
If I may respond to that.
Okay.
Please do.
Yes. Of course your sexuality is your own. Nobody is denying that. But you have to reflect on what is the purpose of this sexuality. What is the purpose of the fact that you are a young man or a young woman, and that you are called to whatever it is you are called in life? Not everything that we are attracted to is necessarily good. There are many married people who are attracted to someone outside the marriage, but they may not do something like that, to go have a relationship with someone outside the marriage. Simply because we are attracted to something does not make it okay to do that thing.
Thank you for your speech, Brian McKevitt. Now I'd like to call upon the Trinity Shopman member of Page County Parliament, Reverend Darren.
Mr. Chairman, Auditor, ladies and gentlemen of the College Philosophical Society, ladies and gentlemen. It is, as always, a great privilege and a pleasure to come and speak to the Phil. And I'm particularly delighted, as Church of Ireland or Anglican chaplain here in the College, I'm particularly delighted to be speaking on this particular motion here this evening. One of my great heroes is a man called Archbishop Desmond Tutu. And I had the great privilege and pleasure of meeting him when he came to college here in 2009. Anyway, Desmond Tutu, arguably one of the most inspiring Christian leaders of our time, said this about the church that both he and I are members of, the Anglican Church or the Anglican community. Desmond Tutu said that the church's attitude towards gay and lesbian people makes him ashamed. But it makes me ashamed as well. I am ashamed that almost all Christian churches, with some honourable exceptions, almost all churches have a scandalous and utterly indefensible record when it comes to people who are gay or lesbian. But Desmond Tutu also goes on to say, and again I agree with him, that it need not and it should not be that way. In fact, you may know that since his retirement as Archbishop of Cape Town, Desmond Tutu has been an outspoken advocate for gay rights, and it is precisely his Christian faith that inspires him and motivates him. Listen to this, for instance. This is what he wrote for an Amnesty International report called Sex, Love and Homophobia. Desmond Tutu wrote, "This is a matter of ordinary justice. We struggled against apartheid in South Africa because black people were being blamed and made to suffer for something we could do nothing about, our very skins. It is the same with sexual orientation. It is a given." He went on, I could not have fought against the discrimination of apartheid and not also fight against the discrimination which homosexuals endure even in our churches and faith groups. So let nobody ever tell you that to be a Christian means you have to be anti-gay. As the example of Desmond Tutu shows, it is in fact precisely the opposite. It is because of our conviction that we are all God's children, that many of us, myself included, in the churches, that we feel so strongly about this issue. But what about the Bible? Does the Bible not condemn homosexuality? Well, in preparation for tonight, I decided I would get a piece of paper and make a list of all the references to homosexuality in the Bible. Here it is. On the internet, I'm holding up a blank piece of paper. That's right, it's absolutely blank. As regards the modern, scientific understanding of of homosexuality as simply a minority orientation on the spectrum of human sexuality, the Bible has nothing to say. It's very, I'm going to finish this point first. It's very, very important to repeat that. As regards the kind of loving, faithful, same-sex relationships that we now celebrate with civil partnerships, and hopefully soon we'll celebrate with marriages, as regards those kind of loving relationships, the Bible has absolutely nothing to say. No, thank you. How could it? The very word itself doesn't appear in the English language until the 19th century. So they, the writers of the Bible, quite simply had no understanding, couldn't possibly have any understanding of what we today understand as homosexuality. I'll take your point.
Seriously, to say the Bible has nothing to say about homosexuality and not complicit in oppression of gay people is an absolute cop-out. Can you please explain, and I'm honest with this, why it is that the text in Bible Belt constantly draws on the Bible to justify its extremely explicitly homophobic beliefs?
Yeah, they're absolutely and totally wrong. And I would say the next time you meet them, I would bring this piece of paper, I'll lend it to you, and make exact points. Or you can get your own when they're freely available. And make your own points. This is really, really crucial. As regards the kind of loving, faithful gay relationships that we all know in our friends, our brothers, our sisters, our aunts, our uncles, these things are not condemned in the Bible. They can't be. They did not have our modern understanding of homosexuality. Let me give you an example. This might help with your arguments with the Bible believers, Bible bashers, Bible abusers, I should say, in the American South. Listen to what St. Paul writes in his letter to the Romans. This is often quoted. Will be quoted by your pals in America. Not your pals, but you know what I mean. In Romans chapter 1, verse 26, St. Paul writes this: "Their women exchanged natural relations for unnatural, and their men likewise gave up natural relations with women and were consumed with passions." In other words, Paul is working from the assumption that everybody is naturally straight. Everybody is born straight. And so therefore anybody who does anything different is making a free and in his eyes a perverse choice. But we know that that's simply not true. As our former president, and somebody mentioned it earlier, Mary McCallig said just 2 weeks ago, or I think it was actually just last week, we now know that for gay people, just being gay is a discovery and not a decision. So whatever Paul is condemning, and there have been endless arguments among scholars about the exact meaning of the words, whatever it is most definitely not our modern understanding of gay relationships. Sorry, it's not only Nell who can be on a roll, you know. I should also mention the other Bible verse which is often thrown out at debates like this. And this is the story of Sodom and Gomorrah. However, if you actually read the story, and again I would suggest you do, as I think Lily said earlier, as it appears in the Bible, you'll notice several things. First, the sin is never specified. Never specified. Second, the sin that is committed by the men at Lot's house is gang rape. Gang rape by a majority of presumably straight men. The sex element, same-sex element, isn't even mentioned. In fact, the violation of the rules of hospitality, that seems to be the real sin. And thirdly, if you read the story, and those of you who know it will know, what does Lot do? Lot gets his 2 daughters and says to the crowd, "Rape my 2 daughters instead of these men." What a weird story to start basing your ethics on. me say it again for those Americans listening online. As regards loving same-gender relationships, the Bible has absolutely nothing to say. It has lots to say. No, thank you. It has lots to say about prostitution, cult prostitution. It has lots to say about pederasty. It has lots to say about sexual exploitation. But those, as we know, are equal opportunity vices. They apply just as much to those of us that are straight as they apply to those who happen to be gay. To tar all gay people with this particular brush is an appalling slander. But, you may be thinking, I'm still not convinced. Aren't the majority of churches against it? Isn't the Pope against it? Well, yes, you're right, he is. The Roman Catholic Church, and I'm very sorry to say this, still uses, shamefully in my opinion, phrases like objectively disordered about people who are gay. And quite frankly, they ought to know better. Because, no thank you, I'll take your questions at the end. The Catholic Church ought to know better. Because quite frankly, and I hope I don't shock anyone here, but homosexuality is not unknown amongst the ranks of the clergy. In fact, I have a good friend, he's left the Catholic Church now, but he was a priest. He tells me, now he may be exaggerating here, he tells me that apparently up to 1 in 10 of Catholic priests is straight. As I say, he's probably exaggerating. But to get back to my point, it is true. Of course it's true. There are many different views among Christians on this issue. And those of us who are involved in churches need to take a stand. So let me tell you where I am standing. I'm standing with Desmond Tutu. I'm standing with Emmet. I'm standing for the gospel of the Queendom of God. I'm standing for the gospel that in Christ there is no longer slave or free. There is no longer male or female. There is no longer gay or straight. Either we are all made in God's image, or none of us is made in God's image. There's no halfway house. So, I'll end with just another quote from Desmond Tutu. This again is from that Amnesty International book. For me, Tutu writes, this struggle, the struggle for gay rights, this struggle is a seamless rope. Opposing apartheid was a matter of justice. Opposing discrimination against women is a matter of justice. Opposing discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation is a matter of justice. But it's also a matter of love. Every human being is precious. We all must be allowed to love each other with honor. I couldn't agree more. I beg you to oppose this motion. Thank you.
Sharing the same side of the table as Father McKevitt, I think it's unlikely that we're going to find much agreement apart from in the truth of tonight's motion. I remember very recently seeing an atheist with a placard protesting, and it had the image of Michelangelo's David from the Sistine Chapel, and above it was God, knows the future. Underneath, gets angry when stuff happens. And it's become something of a staple in comedy to spell out the particulars of a religious doctrine and let its palpable absurdity set off the waves of laughter. It is, if you'll pardon the metaphor, low-hanging fruit in comedy terms. Part of the reason for the ubiquity of this humour lies in religion's boundless capacity to startle us with its naivety, its ignorance of natural laws, and its barbarism. It is indeed a strong-willed comedian who will have noticed how obliging a font of material the world's faiths are and decline to return to the well for more laughs. Now tonight, I plan to argue that religion is the final area of human discourse that still denies the necessity of grounding its assertions in evidence and facts, that by relying on pre-scientific scriptures and histories, all major religions are hostage to irrational propositions, and that this has visible outcomes in the real world, noticeable amongst which is the mistreatment and vilification of sexual and gender minorities. I will also argue that the problem that this presents is far greater than the atrocious campaign it wages against LGBT citizens, and has in fact become existential in nature. For sake of time and simplicity, I will confine myself to criticisms of the two largest monotheisms, Christianity and Islam. I think Sam Harrod put it very well when he said, "There is not a single word of the Bible or the Quran that could not have been authored by a first-century person. There are pages and pages of how to sacrifice animals and keep slaves, and who to kill and why. There is nothing about DNA, there is nothing about infectious disease. In fact, there's nothing particularly useful, but there is lots of Iron Age barbarism and plenty of superstition. We live on a planet with the moral equivalent of autoimmune dysfunction. Different groups of our 7 billion plus fellow humans have mutually antagonistic opinions on what constitutes moral truth. All around the world exist ideological fault lines. They are places where groups of humans kill and displace their fellow human beings for nothing more than being holders of different sets of ideas. These are not wars of necessity, nor are they after essential resources. They are characterized by genetically indistinguishable groups of people dehumanizing and butchering each other over different conceptions of right and wrong, good and evil, worship and blasphemy. Now we have an annual reminder of this mechanism and its clear operation with the parades of Ulster every year in the marching season. The survival value of this social behaviour is precisely zero, and the liabilities are practically unending. And yet every year, completely predictably, the drama returns. To me, the tribal and sectarian posturing shown on our TV screen is an unvarnished illustration of just how thin the veneer of civilization is. And this is in a 21st century, affluent, Northern European democratic society. This behaviour is 100% maladaptive. The software that is running on the minds of the people acting out this tragic farce is a product of two things: universal human inclinations, plus the specific cultural contingencies that pertain in society. It is impossible not to notice that the critical step in programming this maladaptive software comes from the education system. Religious education may from the vantage of a middle-class background look benign, but the consequences mapped out onto a majority of this planet's children is demonstrably harmful. It generates a proportion of people whose worldviews are entirely untethered to a respect for facts or evidence. It also creates social divisions ripe for unscrupulous and demagogic leaders to exploit and victimize those who do not share in-group status and use it as a route to power. Ulster's parade tensions are forceful reminders of this dynamic, but they pale beside the wanton slaughter of Shia civilians by Sunni militias in Iraq. It is a tragic axiom that where religious friction runs high, tolerance for non-gender conforming people and sexual minorities quickly disappears, most often turning to outright violence. Some of you may have read about in the media about the waves of murders of gay men in Baghdad. This is not a coincidence. The feedbacks that come into play when society ruptures along faith lines ensures that LGBT people are among the first to be attacked and invariably imperiled to a higher degree than the general population. By way of contrast, when you cross-reference the categories of democracy and atheism, you generate a list of countries that are most remarkable for their peaceful societies, stable institutions, freedom of expression, and the longevity and health of their populations. Sweden, Australia, Austria, Denmark, and Norway are among the most atheistic countries in the world, and they also have the highest levels of equality, female participation in government, literacy, rule of law, and safety for their LGBT citizens. It is also instructive to note that the most religious countries in the world are Somalia and the Democratic Republic of Congo. It is my contention that we have long passed the moment when our religious scriptures offered us any benefits either as practical guides or as ethical signposts. Christians and Jews often point to the Ten Commandments as the zenith of moral wisdom, but that really bears very little scrutiny. No, thank you. The first three commandments enjoin people to worship and fear the author. They rather redundantly command the reader to keep the commandments. They declare an injunction against taking the Lord's name in vain and require the keeping of the Sabbath. None of this, you will notice, remotely falls under the heading of morality. Honouring thy father and thy mother appears controversial, except that we have all encountered news stories about parents whose atrocious crimes render them unfit for the honour of their children, making this eternal commandment look decidedly less than absolute. Iftikhar and Farzana Ahmed felt that defending their honour as parents required the suffocation of their daughter with a plastic bag. I would like to know from tonight's religious speakers whether they think that the parents who abuse, disown and murder their children because they are LGBT or T deserve the protection of that commandment. Then come the thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not commit adultery, thou shalt not steal. Useful guidelines, no question, but if you set certain ethical constraints, you will find that most people have no difficulty whatsoever construing a situation where killing somebody is the moral thing to do. And I'm not the first person to find it problematic that in this monument of moral law, adultery and stealing share the same level of condemnation as killing. Then we come to, thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbour. This is a brilliant, ethical and insightful commandment. A jewel coming after the cultish mumbo-jumbo opening, followed by a banal and non-absolute middle. The final celestial law is about coveting your neighbour's possessions, including his wife. It is a demonstration, if one were needed, that the Old Testament is an artifact of the largely unenlightened minds of patriarchal tribesmen. Followers of the Prophet Muhammad offer Sharia as a distillation of the highest ethical precepts. The world's second largest faith debases all women, more than half the human race, and that alone should be sufficient to condemn it as an ideology. Its other destructive doctrines, such as taqiyya, martyrdom, dimitude, and jihad, are merely dehumanizing ornaments to the disfigurement caused by Islam's misogyny. Nobody needs to be a moral philosopher to also recognize that killing apostates and homosexuals is unlikely to represent the ultimate pinnacle of morality. Our species has now reached a stage of technological development where our self-immolation is a distinct possibility. On top of the potential for geopolitical instability leading to apocalyptic warfare, there is now the added risk of people running their maladaptive religious software on their brains, and they now have positions in militaries and societies where they have the authority to deploy mass death. A lot of world focus is centered on Iran's nuclear ambitions right now, but let us not forget, in Syria, enormous stockpiles of chemical weaponry sit in the smouldering countryside, surrounded by a sectarian conflict, which is itself a mid-sized set piece in Islam's generational civil war. How do we calculate the risks of military being sent by the Assad regime to its Shia proxies in Lebanon and thence to any world flashpoint? The worst-case scenario of religiously infatuated madmen using WMD is both terrifying and eminently plausible. As our weaponry increases in lethality and simplicity of use, it becomes ever more inviting to any religious madman whose reading of scripture fuels a belief in Armageddon to please his or her deity with murder on a grand scale. And in case you believe this is a paranoid flight of fancy, 160 years ago, using 1850s weaponry, Hong Ji-Huan, a man who believed himself to be the brother of Jesus Christ, started a war that took over 20 million lives. The Taiping Rebellion is a largely overlooked episode of recent religious barbarism, but just as a thought exercise, transpose this leader into a modern context, one where Pakistani nuclear scientist A.Q. Khan is selling components for nuclear weapons to North Korea and anyone else who can pay, and you have the stage set for the destruction of our species. There are global natural catastrophes which have the potential to destroy human civilization, but probably not wipe out the entire species. The supervolcano under Yellowstone National Park is a leading candidate in this category, as is anthropogenic climate change. Given our circumstances relative to these threats, it is a breathtaking misuse of humanity's time to be fixating on interpreting the desires of a fictional, sociopathic sky wizard from Bronze Age literature, and killing our fellow human beings for having a different interpretation of this will. It is high time we outgrew the morbid intellectual chains of religion. Events that have the potential to wipe out our civilization, and indeed our species, are unquestionably in our future. What is a better use of our time and energy? Arguing about whether LGBT people should have the right to live unthreatened by religious bigotry? Or studying and planning how to survive and adapt to cataclysms that we know we will encounter in our future? The fevered narcissism of religious infatuation is a luxury that our species can no longer afford. In the words of Edgar Allan Poe, all religion, my friends, is simply evolved out of fraud, fear, greed, imagination, and poetry. It is time to quit humanity's last redoubt of irrationality and stop mortgaging our future on the basis of 2,000-year-old myths and propaganda. I move to propose the motion which stands in our name.
HMC, Senior Software Law College student, Gloria.
What's my turn? This isn't a debate about whether religion is good or bad. This isn't a debate about whether homosexuality is right or wrong, but thank you for that. Has the LGBT movement been damaged by the Catholic Church? Yes. Is religion incompatible with homosexuality? No. What I'm going to do is I'm going to discuss the nature of religion, because I think the main issue in this whole debate is how we ourselves define religion. I'm going to explain to you how religion in itself is changeable. It changes throughout history, and it has. Like, religion first came about because there was a need to institutionalize all these values as an answer to a collective action problem. And these values were based in the society of that time. But throughout history, we have changed those teachings because society has demanded it too. Like, okay. Touch me, please. Okay, do you now have to burn a dove at the end of the week because I'm on my period and you are now unclean? Because that is what Leviticus tells us. That is what the Bible tells us, ladies and gentlemen, along with the fact that we can't wear mixed cottons, along with the fact that we can't touch pigskin, okay? Because what I'm trying to get at here is that the Bible is bullshit, okay? And that that's not actually what we base our religion on, okay? Because, like, religion is effectively a human construct. It's reflective and it progresses within society. Yes, it's slow to progress, and I share your anger on that, but eventually it does if we demand it to. So, like, to say that religion is incompatible with homosexuality is similar to saying law is incompatible with homosexuality, because before the 1990s it was illegal to be gay. But we've developed from that. The institution has reacted to society's demands, and that is exactly what religion does. No, thank you. And like things like contraception, things like sex before marriage, are these things really in your head incompatible with religion? No, ladies and gentlemen. What happened when we found evolution? They said saws Adam and Eve. Yes, there are fundamentalists. They did though, and we adapted to that because society had to adapt religion into that context. Yes, there are fundamentalists that still believe don't believe in evolution, but that's the problem with the proposition, that everyone on this side are absolutists. And that's the danger. We cannot approach religion with an absolutist approach, because then we're using it as an excuse for bigots. That's what we're doing. No, thank you, Jamie. Because when men like this are in power, when men like this define religion for us, they play on our fears. They tell us that they create this falsity that religion is this concrete thing, when if you actually look at it, it's really not. It's something that has changed all throughout time. So what I'm saying is it doesn't have to be incompatible with homosexuality if we don't accept that it is. And what I'm going to explain to you now is why it shouldn't be incompatible. I'm not an advocate for religion. I hate God, I love gas, whatever. Okay? Last year I would have spoken on propositions alongside Max. But I think something did happen to me that made me change. Something made me realise when I was in the States this summer. And it was actually when I was with Lorcan's gay uncles, and they were telling me about the church they go to every Sunday. And I disregarded it, being like, why are two gay men going to a church? And I actually popped into the church. And that is when I realised what the definition of religion is. The definition of religion is not what this man is telling you about. The definition of religion is a universal thing. By the way, we're not just talking about the Catholic Church here, we're talking about religion as a concept. There's loads of them. What religion is sort of the two common denominators, universally, is that religion is quite a personal, individual thing that we can choose to value and we can choose not to value, unlike sexuality, which you can't choose, by the way. So one of the main elements is faith. This idea that we have to constantly question what's out there, because we are, everyone is essentially agnostic when you think about it. Even if we put a label on it saying we're not, no one knows, and anyone that does claim to know is probably crazy. Okay, so
the idea that that's not compatible, that the ability to have faith and to constantly question and look for an answer is not compatible with homosexuality is ludicrous. The second thing that I saw is this idea of community, and that's the most important thing I'm talking about here. That is why we cannot propose this motion for the future of Ireland, for the future of our society, for the future of the LGBT movement. We cannot propose this motion because what religion does is it does bring people together. And by proposing this motion, what we're doing is isolating those individuals. Because it's very easy for people like me and Max, who don't believe in God and don't follow religion, to stand up here and tell you how we hate God and love the gays. That's easy for us to do. But we're not everybody, okay? There are people that are religious and there are people that are gay, and there are people that are gay and religious, okay? And it's extremely difficult because what we're doing is we're leaving the gay altar boy behind. We're leaving so many people that find it so difficult to come out because they have such an affiliation with religion, because we're telling them you cannot be religious and you cannot be gay at the same time. This is detrimental to our society, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah.
Is it not the case that saying that homosexuality and religion are incompatible is not identical to telling gay people that they must lose their faith in order to embrace their sexual identity? I don't agree with you with that proposition.
No, because I've explained to you that, we have a choice here to interpret religion as we wish. We have a choice here to demand that the Catholic Church changes its ways. And it's been done before, and it can be done. So I do think that, to say that religion and homosexuality is incompatible puts out, penetrates this awful homophobia that exists with the people that have affiliation with churches, that associate religion with being good and therefore are terrified to accept their sexuality, as Emmet has spoken to you about. If you propose this motion, you are proposing the definition that this man has put out for you. If you are proposing this motion, you are believing his lies. If you propose this motion, you're believing people in power of the church that want to fill you with these lies about. Yeah. If you oppose this motion, you side on the side of reason. You side on the side of moderation. You for the sake of change, for the sake of our country, for the sake of our society, and for the sake of the LGBT movement, I beg you to oppose.
Ladies and gentlemen, I asked to speak in this motion, but the tab was already full. I'm sorry if it appears imbalanced. I am a Trinity student. I'm halfway through a PhD in history, and I'm also a speaker for Catholic Comment. It's an organisation of lay Catholics set up to explain the position of the Catholic Church in the world as well as in Ireland. And our objective is really to give a sanguine viewpoint of Catholic teaching and to show that it's not all sort of about condemnation and judgment, but it's very much about reaching out to the other side and reaching out to everybody. The motion that was put before the House tonight seems very clear-cut and black and white, but it's not. Because at the end of the day, we're dealing with human beings on both sides. And I'll give you two examples. Father Brian McKevitt here is a man who's dedicated his life to God. Now, many of you might think that's a very foreign, vague, alien concept. For him, God is love. He's dedicated himself to something which is a great love in his life. He's made a personal sacrifice. He will never be married. He will never have children. He will probably die very lonely, except for the company of what we call the angels and the saints. But for all intents and purposes, he has made a huge sacrifice. And he has done so for the love of God and for the love of others. Emmet Jordan-Kelly is a man who I think we can all agree is a hero. He is a man who has endured quite a lot in his life, a man who should never have had to pray or to beg that he would not be who he found himself to be. Because nobody should really be ashamed of who they are. We're all born a particular way. And I think we can all agree that everybody has their own individual, human and spiritual dignity. Now, I want to tell you a story, but before I do, I'll be very brief. Did you know that there is a young man who is a journalist in England, who is a devout Catholic, and who is also gay? And this journalist defends the position of the Roman Catholic Church in society as an openly gay man. It's not so black and white now, is it? This man is very heroic. He's very open about the fact that he's homosexual. He will not deny the fact that he is homosexual. His name is Richard Waghorn, and he writes for the Irish Times and several British newspapers. Did you know that Pope Benedict XVI spoke out about homophobic violence and bullying in schools? He actually said that this is a problem that has not been addressed, that has never been sufficiently addressed before, and that actually needs wider attention, because young people, boys, girls, or young men and women constantly face bullying for complete misinterpretations or for completely the wrong reason, or prejudices because of their sexuality. The story I want to tell you is this. My concluding remarks is I got off a bus at Donnybrook Church and I found a young man sleeping in the doorway of Donnybrook Church. And I got to know this man. I came up to check on him because I thought he might be dead. And we got talking over the course of a couple of months, so we'd bring him food every night. And sometimes I would give him money, sometimes I wouldn't. And I discovered that this guy was gay, and he left home in Holland and ended up homeless on the streets. His life fell apart 2 years ago because his partner committed suicide. And he ended up in the streets not really knowing what to do. I watched over the course of about 3 months as this young man rebuilt his life. I'll be finished in a second. And he applied for a job at Google Ireland, and he got through 5 rounds of interviews. And every night he'd sleep in the doorway of Donnybrook Church out in the cold. And every day he'd go into the National Library, go on the computer, and organise job applications for himself. He got through all those 5 rounds of interviews, and he had one last round to go to. So he asked me for the money to buy a suit, just a loan. And knowing that I was a devout Catholic and knowing that he was gay, he was very reluctant to ask me for this. But I gave him €150 to buy his suit. And he got through the last interview. He's now working for Google Ireland. He's very happy and he's off the streets. To be quite honest with you, the greatest Christian act that I ever performed in my entire life was helping that young gay man get off the streets and get a job. And that is why I believe that homosexuality and religion are not incompatible, because we are all children of God, all equal, and that nobody has the right to judge one another. And that who we are, what our sexuality is not something that we can necessarily condemn. And just because we are religious, and because we are spiritual, does not necessarily mean that we are all bigots. Thank you.